No. In last period we see some numerical example, and the numerical will be solved at the end of some period. Today we start with the next chapter, that is force and the laws of the motion. Now in 8th standard you studied some concept of the force. In many centuries, in last chapter we see the motion of the object along a straight line. For the motion of the object along a straight line, from many centuries different scientists think about what causes the motion of the object along a straight line, which is the quantity, physical quantity associated with the motion of the object, or the cause for the motion of the object. Then Galileo and Sir Isaac Newton quenched their ideas or quench their curiosities, what causes the motion of the object. When the object is kept at a certain place, then it will remain in the state of rest. Thus, state of rest is the natural state of the object. Why? There are two states of the object. One is the state of uniform motion, and the second is the state of the rest. When the object is at rest, it will remain in the state of rest, and hence rest is the natural state of the object. Rest is the natural state of the object. If you pull the certain object, then it changes its position, means there is a motion of the object. If you push the object, then it changes its position of the object and set into the motion. Similarly, if you take the ball and hit to it, then the ball changes its position and set into the another state. Thus, pushing, pulling and the hitting, these are the three processes by which the state of the object can be changed. Means, if you take the object and it is in the rest position, and if you pull it, it changes its position and set into the motion. Similarly, if there is one object and if you push the object, it changes the state of rest and set into motion. म्हणजे it changes the position, and if you hit the object, then the object changes its state of rest and set into the motion. So thus, the three processes by which the state of the object can be changed, and the first is the pulling, second is the pushing, and third is the hitting of the object. The which physical processes changes the state of the object. So there are three processes by which the state of the object can be changed, and these processes are pushing. The processes are, first is pulling, second is the pushing, and the third process is the hitting. So these three physical processes changes the state of the object. म्हणजे it changes the state of rest or the state of uniform motion. The which physical processes changes the state of the object. So there are three processes which changes the state of the object, and the first process is pulling, second process is pushing, and the third process is the hitting of the object. Example is the bullock then pull the cart, and cart changes its state of rest and set into motion. If there is a car at the rest, and if you push it, then the car changes the state and set into motion. And if there is a ball, and if you hit the ball, then the ball changes its state of rest or the state of the rest and set into the motion. Thus pulling, pushing, and the hitting changes the state of the rest and set into the motion. Which physical quantity changes the state of the rest or the state of uniform motion? This physical quantity is given as the name force. What is meant by force? म्हणजे by the three physical processes, pulling, pushing, and the hitting, which physical quantity is applied to the object that changes the state of the object. This physical quantity is called the force. The force is the physical quantity. What is meant by force? Force is the physical quantity which changes which tends to change the state of the rest, which changes the state of rest or the state of uniform motion. State of rest or the state of uniform motion is called the force. Uniform motion is called force. What is meant by force then? म्हणजे by the three processes, which physical quantity is applied to the object that changes the state of object, means it causes the motion of the object. So this physical quantity is called the force. The force is the physical quantity which changes the state of rest or the state of uniform motion of the object is called the force. The define force. What is meant by force? Force is the physical quantity which changes the state of rest or the state of uniform motion of the object, that is called the force. What is meant by force then? Force is the physical quantity which changes the state of rest or the state of uniform motion is called the force. The force is defined, or sometimes the definition is like this: the force is the physical quantity which tends to change, TENDS, tends to change the state of rest or the state of uniform motion of the object, that is called the force. So in last year you see the different types of the forces, and the one type of the force then it is called the contact force, and the second type of the force then it is called the non-contact force. In 8th standard you studied there are two types of the forces. One is the contact force and the second is the non-contact force. When the force exerted by one body on the another body by making contact to it, that is called the contact force. म्हणजे when the force is applied to the object by making the contact of the one object to the another object is called the contact force. And there are two types of the contact force, and one that is called the normal force, and the second type of the force is frictional force. म्हणजे there are two types of the contact forces, and the one type of the contact force is normal force and second is the frictional force आहे. म्हणजे contact force is applied when one body makes contact with the another body. This force is called the contact force. There are two types of contact force, and one is normal force and second is the frictional force. When we walk on the road or when the body is kept on the road, then there is a friction between the surface of the road and the surface of the body, and this type of the force is frictional force. And if this is then the direction of motion, then the direction of frictional force is always opposite to the direction of motion. म्हणजे if there is cycle running on the road and if you stop pedaling, then the cycle stop because the frictional force opposes the motion of the cycle. Then normal force is when body is kept on the surface of the road. The weight mg is acting in vertically downward direction, and this is action, and the force is acting in the upward direction by the surface on the body normal to it. This force then that is called the normal force, and in this case the body makes contact with the surface of the earth, surface of the body. So there are two types of the contact forces, and one is normal force and second is frictional force. When body is kept on the table or on the surface of the earth, the weight is acting in vertically downward direction, and the surface exerts a force on the body, in the upward direction normal to it, hence it is called the normal force. When one body is kept on the another body, then there is a friction between the two surfaces of the body in contact. This force is called the frictional force, and the direction of frictional force is always opposite to the direction of the motion of the object. Then the force exerted by one body on the one object on the another object, when they are not in contact with each other, such type of the force, then that is called the non-contact forces. म्हणजे the force exerted by one object on the another object without making contact to it, that is called the non-contact force, and by making contact with it is called the contact force. म्हणजे there is the between their two definition only small difference. What is contact force? The force exerted by one object on the another object by making contact with each other is called the contact force, and the force exerted by one object on the another object without making contact to it is called the non-contact force. There are two types of non-contact force, and one is the gravitational force, and the second type of the force is electromagnetic force. Electromagnetic force, and electromagnetic force is the electrostatic force, म्हणजे due to electricity, and the second force is due to magnetic force. Magnetic. There are two types of non-contact forces. One is gravitational force and second is the electromagnetic force. Electromagnetic is the electrostatic force and magnetic force. Suppose if you throw a stone in the sky, then the stone after sometimes falls on the earth. There is no contact of earth actually to the stone, but due to the gravitational force of attraction of the earth, the stone falls on the earth. So this type of the force is gravitational force. Or if there is some object in the above the surface of earth, or there is satellite, sometimes it falls on the earth due to the gravitational force of attraction. Similarly, electromagnetic and the electrostatic force. If you take the small pieces of paper and by comb, if you then kept near to it, then it is attracted. Or if you take the iron pieces and if you bring the magnet attract the iron pieces. So this type of the force, then that is called the non-contact force. These forces are not given in your syllabus, but they are in some book, that is the foundation book. What are then the types of the forces? Now then, as per the syllabus of the 9th standard, there are then two types of the forces are given, and the one type of the force, that is called the balance force, and the second type of the force is unbalanced force. These are explained in your book, what is meant by balanced forces and what is meant by unbalanced forces. So there are two types of the forces acting on the object. One is called the balanced forces and second, that is called the unbalanced forces. Consider the object. Suppose this is the object kept on the horizontal surface of the table, and the forces X and the forces Y are applied to the two ends of the object in the opposite direction. Suppose this is the object and this object is kept on the horizontal surface of the table. The forces X and Y are applied to the object in opposite direction to the two opposite end of the object. This is one end of object, another. When only the force X is applied, then the object changes its position and moves towards the left. When the force Y is applied only, then the object moves towards the right. म्हणजे consider the action of forces. Suppose only the force X is applied to the object and no force is applied, force Y is applied to the object, then the object moves towards the left. When the force only Y is applied to the object and no force X is applied to the object, then object move towards the right. Do you understand the experiment? Consider this is the object. It is kept on the surface of the table, horizontal surface of table, and the forces X and Y are applied to the object at the two ends of the object. So this is then experiment. Now what are then the observation? When only force X is applied to the object and the force Y is not applied to the object, then object move towards the left. When the force Y is only applied and no force X is applied to the object, then the object move towards the right. When the forces X and Y are simultaneously applied, simultaneously means at the same time, X is applied and Y is applied. When the forces X and Y are applied to the object simultaneously of equal value, म्हणजे this is also equal and this is also equal, म्हणजे if it is 100, then if Y is also 100, then there is no change in the position of the object. Object will remain at its own position. What is the third action? When only X is applied force, object move towards the left. When only Y force is applied, object move towards the right. But when the forces X and Y are simultaneously applied and they are of equal value, then the object does not change its position. The such type of the forces which do not change the position of the object are called the balanced forces. Therefore, the balanced forces are defined as when two or more forces are acting on the object simultaneously. How they are applied? They should be applied simultaneously, means at the same time. The when two or the more forces applied to the object simultaneously and they do not change the state of the rest or the state of uniform motion, this type of the forces are called the balanced forces. म्हणजे what is mean by balanced force then? The balanced forces are when two or more, here only two, but there may be number of forces acting on the body in different direction. The when two or the more number of forces are acting on the object, how? Simultaneously at the same time, and if they do not change the state of rest or the state of uniform motion of the object, then this type of the forces are called the balanced forces. Now then, what are then the unbalanced forces? When only X is applied, when only Y is applied, then in that case that changes the state of the rest position of object. Therefore, unbalanced forces are defined as when two or the more forces acting on the object simultaneously and they change the state of the rest or the state of uniform motion of the object are called the unbalanced forces. So there are two types of the force causes the motion. म्हणजे it changes the state of rest or the state of uniform motion. Then there are two types of the forces and one is called the balanced forces and second is unbalanced forces. Balanced forces are defined as when two or the more forces are acting on the object simultaneously and if they do not change the state of rest or the state of uniform motion of the object, then they are called the balanced forces. And when two or the more forces acting on the object simultaneously and they change the state of the position of the position of object, means state of rest or the state of uniform motion, that is called the unbalanced forces. Do you understand? What are then the types of forces? There are two types of forces. One is balanced forces and the second is unbalanced forces. So what is unbalanced forces? When two or more forces acting on the object simultaneously is important. When two or the more forces acting on the object simultaneously and they do not change the state of rest or the state of uniform motion of the object, then they are called the balanced forces. And the forces, when two or more forces acting on the object simultaneously and they change the state of the rest or the state of uniform motion of the object, are called the unbalanced forces. Both the forces, when two or more forces acting on the object simultaneously and they do not change the state of object, means state of rest or state of uniform motion, are called the balanced forces. And unbalanced forces are when two or the more forces acting on the object simultaneously and they change the state of the object, means state of rest or the state of uniform motion, are called the unbalanced forces. from the definition of balance and unbalanced force, which force causes the motion of the object? Which type of force produces the motion? Balanced force produces the motion or unbalanced force produces the motion? Which type of force produces? Unbalanced force acting on the object produces the motion of the object. म्हणजे if you want to produce the motion, which type of force should be acting? Unbalanced force should be acting on object. This should remember, this is important point, कि when balanced forces are acting on the object, there is no change in position of the object, means object remains stationary, and when unbalanced forces are acting on the object, there is a motion of the object and the object changes its position and set into the motion. Means for the motion of object, which type of force necessary? Unbalanced force is necessary. So there are two types of the forces, and one is unbalanced force and the second is the balanced force, balance and unbalanced force. Now then we define the another type of the forces. One is the net force, or sometimes it is called the resultant force. What is meant by net force or resultant force? The when number of forces are acting on the object, suppose this is then the object, and number of forces F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, F6, F7, F8, F9, F10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Means when number of forces are acting on the object produces some acceleration. म्हणजे when force is acting on the object set into motion and the acceleration is produced. So when 10 forces are acting on the object, produces the acceleration is equal to 5 meter per second square. So this is then the 10 forces. When the number of forces acting on the object simultaneously produces same acceleration, and if the same acceleration is produced by a single force, then the single force is called the resultant force, or that is called the net force acting on the object. Means F is equal to F1 plus F2 plus F3 plus F4 plus F5 plus F6 plus F7 plus F8 plus F9 plus F10. So this type of the force, then it is called the net force, or sometimes it is called the resultant force. The when number of forces are acting on the object simultaneously produces some acceleration. Means 10 forces are acting on the object, produces the acceleration 5 meter per second square, and if the same acceleration is produced by a single force, then the single force, that is called the net force, or that is called the resultant force. So what is meant by net force or resultant force then? when number of forces are acting on the object simultaneously produces some acceleration, and if the same acceleration is produced by a single force, then the single force is called the net force, or that is called the resultant force. So this is another one type of the force, that is net force, or that is called the resultant force. Means when the number of forces, in this case, when the object is kept on the surface of the earth, the weight is acting in downward direction. Then in this case, the surface produces the reaction in opposite direction, called the normal force. And if normal force is equal to mg, then resultant force is equal to 0 in this case, because they are equal and opposite. The n is equal to mg, hence resultant force, or the net force acting on the object, is equal to 0. Now similarly, when there is object is stationary on the surface of earth, then the weight of the object that is balanced by the frictional force. When we stand on the surface of earth, then our weight that is balanced by the force of friction between surface of earth and our feet. Now in this way, we calculate the resultant force or net force acting on the object. 37 ठीक झाला. ओके, थँक्यू.